theyeshiva.net.
First question. You asked why the Rambam puts in this whole chapter, this is a Sefer Halachas. If it's a Sefer Halachas, why does he have to have the whole history? He doesn't put another history. Why doesn't he tell us about the creation of Adam, about the birth of Noach, about the flood? Go learn Torah Shebeksav. Why is the Rambam teaching this in Hilchos Avodas Zarah? It's not halacha. Why doesn't he right away start with the halachas of Avodas Zarah? This is an excellent question. Excellent. It's a good question. And as I said, there's no chapter like this in Rambam. You're not going to have this in Rambam. In the beginning of the laws of Chanukah, he gives you a little brief history of Chanukah. And over there, we also have to understand why. We'll get to it, Be'ezer Hashem, one day. But here, chapter, azoi, elaborate. Now, the truth is, this information is not articulated in Chumash. The Rambam said you have to learn Mishneh Torah. The Rambam said you have to learn Mishneh Torah after you learn Chumash. Torah Shebeksav, but this doesn't say in Torah Shebeksav. The Rambam gathered this from Torah Shebeksav and many sources in Torah Shebaal Peh. So that's why if you go from Torah Shebeksav to the Rambam, you wouldn't know all these stories. That's why the Rambam has to put it in. But why does he have to put it in, B'chal? Just tell me, Hilchos Avodas Zarah. It's part of the halachas of Torah. Remember, the Rambam is not a book of history. It's not even a book on philosophy, even though in the beginning he puts in some basic ideas of philosophy, but they're all part of mitzvahs. The mitzvah of emun, of Yidiyas Hashem, the mitzvah of emunah, the mitzvah of loving, of unifying God. What is the halacha here? The answer to this was once shared by one possible explanation was shared by the Lubavitcher Rebbe at a Farbrengen, Motzei Shabbos Noach Tafshin Mem. Noach, that's the end of 1979, published in Likutei Sichos, volume 20, Parshas Noach. And he gave an explanation that I think is very, really explains it beautifully and eloquently and accurately, if I may say so. And that is, the Rambam here is not just giving us history, as interesting and intriguing it is, it's not the function of Mishneh Torah. Actually, this is essential to Hilchos Avodas Zarah. Why? Unlike many other mitzvahs, where the focus is on action, I have to sit and eat in a sukkah, or blow shofar, or hear shofar, right? Or read the Megillah, or put on tefillin, or put a mezuzah on my door. Of course, there is the intention behind it, and the thoughts behind it, and the understanding of it. But ultimately, the focus of the mitzvah is action. Avodas Zarah, much of the Hilchos Avodas Zarah is about actions. Actions that we're not allowed to do, 49 of them, and actions that we do have to do, 2 of them. We learned before the 51 mitzvahs. But nonetheless, a major component of Hilchos Avodas Zarah is, as the Rambam said in the beginning, to be able to appreciate the falseness of Avodas Zarah, to understand the vanity of Avodas Zarah, that our minds and our hearts should not be abducted by the ideas of Avodas Zarah. That is part of Hilchos Avodas Zarah. Hilchos Avodas Zarah is not just certain actions. I do things and I don't do other things. Hilchos Avodas Zarah begins with machshava, who I am, how I see the world. Avodas Zarah doesn't just begin with worshiping an idol. It begins with how I see the world, how I understand reality. Do I perceive reality from an Avodas Zarah perspective, Chalila? Or I perceive reality from the perspective of emes, of truth, derech ha'emes, truth, the awareness of God, of Hashem. That's why the Rambam gives the first chapter. He's not just telling you the history of how Avodas Zarah developed. That does not belong in the Sefer. He's explaining to you the evolution of an error. So you should understand how Avodas Zarah began, so you should understand the vanity of it, the stupidity of it, the emptiness of it. And it actually began not from a place of rebelliousness and maliciousness. It actually begins from a place of faith, from a place of goodness, from a place of morality. They want to serve God, but they make a terrible mistake by attributing significance and prominence to anything outside of Hashem. Why were they wrong in the generation of Enosh? Why shouldn't we serve the stars? We are very respectful to the servants of the king. Why shouldn't we be respectful to the sun and the moon? Why shouldn't we thank the sun and the moon? Come on, these are the king's agents, the king's representatives. So Yeshaya HaNavi says, it's like if you finish building a sukkah and then you go and you make a special party to show glory and respect to the hammer that put the nail into the sukkah. Does the axe boast itself for doing anything? It's the one who wields the axe. It's the chopper. The axe is lifeless. The axe has no free choice. The axe did not contribute anything. Of course, it's a tool. It's an important tool. But you don't give the axe itself credit. The axe was created by somebody and used by somebody. Everything in the existence of the world is a tool that Hashem uses. But it has no independent reality whatsoever outside of Hashem himself, whose wisdom and presence and infinity creates it, sustains it every single moment. But this is an error that people make. The Rambam explains how Iker Avodah Zarah developed. Avodah Zarah didn't start with sacrificing children to pagan idols. It begins with an idealistic mistake. But like everything, it devolves. And the Rambam gives you the whole evolution so that you should have perspective of what Avodah Zarah is, how it came about, and most importantly, the emptiness of it, the stupidity of it, the falsehood in it. So now you could actually fulfill Hilchos Avodah Zarah. This is part of halacha. Understanding all of this is part of halacha, so that we should be able to cleanse our minds from the perspective and the notions of Avodah Zarah. And even the details are important, because you see the Rambam goes through 3 stages. He goes through the stages till Avram, one stage till Avram Avinu, which is the demoralization of the world. And then there's Avram Avinu, who rebuilds the world. And then there is the Jews in Egypt who lose it again until Moshe Rabbeinu brings it all back. That is also part of it. It's not just history. With the whole story about Avram Avinu, the Rambam is emphasizing something. Avram was alone in the world, he had no support, and yet with his own mind, he came to the truth. What is the Rambam trying to say here? The Rambam here is loyal to something that he would articulate in all of his works and in all of his writings and in his whole life. And that is, the whole system of Yiddishkeit is not something that is ever requiring blind faith. It does not need you to suspend your rational mind in order to accept another cultist truth. That's antithesis to the essence of Judaism. Look what the Rambam says. Avram Avinu grew up in a culture of idolatry. He had no teacher, no prophet, nobody sharing anything with him. He had one thing, the search for truth. That's what he had. The only tool he had no political power, no military power, no family support, no community support, no support in his schooling or education. He had one thing, the search for truth. And when did it begin? When he was 3 years old, when he was a little baby, when he was a little kid. I want to know truth. He searches for, that's the only thing he had at his disposal, the only weapon. And what happened? He came to it. The Rambam is teaching you something. He's teaching you that when somebody is really looking for the emes, you'll realize Avodah Zarah is nothing. There's no substance to it. Torah is emes. Hashem is emes. Hashem Elokim emes. What an important halacha to understand as an instruction of Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is not just another ritual, don't do this, don't do this. No. The Rambam says you have to. Avodah Zarah is first and foremost about recalibrating your neurons. Perspective, Weltanschauung, Hashkafa Solam. Understand here, we're looking about, the problem of Avodah Zarah is not that the rabbi said not to do it. The problem of Avodah Zarah is that it's false, it's not true, it's a sheker. Vayikra Sham B'Shem Hashem Keloilam is an emes. And that's why perhaps the Rambam chooses, the Rebbe said then, 40 years old, Ben Arbayim Shana, because it says in Pirkei Avos, Ben Arbayim Shana Labina. The Rambam started when he was 3 or 2, when he was in the 3rd year. But the Rambam says, Hikir is Baida, when did he recognize it? Labina. Because what's the Rambam's point here? That this was something Avram Avinu achieved through his mind. There was no prophecy. There was no revelation. There was nobody teaching him things. There was nobody feeding him information. And therefore, when his mind fully matured and developed Bina, he finally got it to a full degree. Even though till 40, he also got a lot of it. And then, of course, he continues to grow. There's age 48 and there's age 50. And throughout his life, he, of course, continues to grow because infinity is infinite and limitlessness is limitless. That makes sense, right? Limitlessness is limitless. And therefore, you continue to grow more awareness. You continue peeling the onions of the layer and you go deeper and deeper. And in this case, the onion never ends. You're dealing with something that's Ein Sof, that's infinite, because something by definition, the one who created the sun and created the moon and created the planets and created the whole system of the cosmos and created the planet and all of its systems must by definition be beyond it, which is transcending time, space, and matter, which you have in the first pasuk, Bereshis bara Elokim hashamayim v'haaretz. Hashem created heaven and earth. So when it says Bereshis bara Elokim v'haaretz, you have 3 things. Bereshis is time, and Shamayim is heaven, and Eretz is earth. So you have time and you have space, defined by heaven, all of space, outer space. and inner space, and you have eretz, which is matter. So you have space, time, and matter, and Elikim must transcend all of them, and that's why it can hold the system together. It creates the laws, it orchestrates the laws, everything is designed in its perfect and unified purpose and integrated, and the whole world is governed by one source, by one entity, which is the basis of monotheism, and this is what Avram Avinu teaches. And Avram Avinu goes from city to city and teaches this to everybody. And there's tens of thousands of people who become part of Avram Avinu's community, part of Avram Avinu's kehillah, part of Avram Avinu's crowd. They are his crowds, they are his people, they are his spiritual children. Es hanefesh asher asa b'charan. But then something happens. In Egypt, the Jews lose it again. The Rambam said there was a nation that knew God, but then something else happens. They lose it. And Moshe Rabbeinu is now sent from Hashem. And he turns the people into God's divine, eternal inheritance. Before that point, it was a nation that on their own, they knew God. But by Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not just on their own they knew God. Hashem chose them as his nachala, and he gave them the mitzvahs, including how you deal with Avodah Zarah and what's the laws pertaining to Avodah Zarah, which becomes the continuation of this chapters. And here the Rambam is pointing out another idea. And that is we have to also realize the vulnerabilities of our minds. Avram Avinu had a true, clear mind and he really searched for the truth. But people are limited. People are very biased. As the Rambam is going to discuss in chapter 2 at length. And people don't have a lot of time. And people sometimes don't have the mental space. And people don't have the training. And people have a lot of other traumas and other preconceived notions and other blind spots and other biases and the way we were trained and the way we grew up and our genetic makeup and our dispositions and our proclivities. So it's very easy also to lose sight of truth. Not because you're a bad person necessarily, but because not every mind has the antenna that is always really, really ready to hear the truth. I have a lot of static in my brain. And the Jews themselves lost it. And that was the uniqueness. That Moshe Rabbeinu comes, and Avodah Zarah becomes part of Torah, it becomes part of mitzvahs. The foundation is now not just every little Jewish kid is not the philosopher of Avram Avinu who figured it out. But rather the foundation becomes that this is the truth that Hashem communicated to me. And that's also part of halacha. Yes, if you use your mind like Avram Avinu, you'll discover the truth and nothing but the truth. But ultimately that was forgotten from the Jewish people, and what guaranteed the eternity of Emunah is that Hashem gave it to Moshe Rabbeinu as a mitzvah that now obligates every single Jew to accept it as part of Torah, which we know is ultimate truth. That's a short answer to your question about the halacha. Next question. Good question. Why, you're asking here, why did Rambam make such a small deal about the miracle? So a miracle happens and he went to Charan. Why such? Well, ask a better question. The miracle is not even mentioned in Chumash. It doesn't say that there was any miracle. The Rambam is basing it on the Chazal that Nimrod wanted to kill Avram Avinu. He threw him into the fire and he had him. It's a little miracle, right? But in Chumash, I believe that it's very, very intentional. Because it goes back to Hilchos Yesodei Torah. Judaism is not based on miracles. In other words, there'll be miracles. You need a miracle. Hashem made a miracle. He's the boss. God made a miracle. But that's not the basis of where Avram Avinu began. Because the moment you start saying, oh, Avram Avinu experienced a miracle. He saw the sea split. He walked out of fire unscathed. So that's why he started to believe. That is not, according to the Rambam, the real, authentic conviction that something is true. He says, not so nice. You need a miracle, there'll be a miracle. Hashem makes miracles, don't worry about it. Avram Avinu was saved. But that's not the story. The story is what happened before that. And that was not a miracle. That was Avram Avinu's own toil and own search for truth until he found it. And the miracle he saw only as an opportunity to continue to speak the truth. So the basis of this is not miracles, which is what the Rambam said in Yesodei Torah. Remember chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9? That when a Navi makes miracles, doesn't mean he's right. Could be he's wrong. Could be he has some black magic skills. The reason we know Matan Torah is true because we saw Matan Torah. And that's why if a Navi changes Torah, we don't believe him. You remember, back to Torah, this is very important. I think this fits in very well with the Rambam here. V'nasa lo'neis gadol is an important story, but it's not the story. That's not the story. The story is not the Neis Gadol. I'm sorry, I said Gadol. I got mixed up with Chanukah, Neis Gadol. Nasa lo'neis. The story is not the miracle. Hashem will do miracles, yeah. The story is what happens before and what happens after. It's the truth that Avram Avinu knew before the miracle and after the miracle. Or to put it differently, the basis of Avram Avinu's awareness is not that there are miracles that are happening to me. It's that all of nature is a miracle. I think that's how we should say it. That's the chiddush of Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu is not this big God in the sky can do miracles. He could. But the chiddush of Avram Avinu is that nature is a miracle, that every element of nature, every one of your 70 trillion every one of your 70 trillion cells that is responsible for the extraordinary miracle of the living organism is a stupendous miracle. And every earthworm that allows for the soil to produce what it produces that we can eat is a living miracle. And every time the tree converts sunlight into glucose through photosynthesis, it's a miracle. And every time my white blood cell surveys the body like a police force and goes around and around to identify invaders and expel them, that's a miracle of extraordinary magnitude. And every time the sun, every day as the sun orbits around the earth, and as the earth rotates, and it allows for days, and it allows for nights, and it allows for climates, and it allows for winds, and it allows for hundreds and thousands of other things that happen as a result of these rotations, that is a miracle. That's what Avram Avinu revealed. That's why I think the Nasa Le'Neis, the Rambam mentions it. It's important to know Hashem will do miracles for you. But that's not the basis of why he believed. It's not like he came to believe in Hashem because he had a miracle. And the Torah doesn't even mention it. It's interesting, the Torah doesn't even mention it. But Bnei Yisachar has a sefer, Igre de Kala. Over there he gives another two very interesting reasons why the Nes is not such a pivotal idea in the Torah. Okay, let me see. Next question. Very good questions. Why were people so obsessed with idolatry? Well, the Rambam discusses here how they became obsessed with idolatry. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin that Rabbi Ashi, in a dream, met Menashe. Menashe was the son of Chizkiah, the king of the Jewish people. We're going to learn about that in the next chapter, chapter 2, at the end, about somebody who cursed Hashem. We'll get to that. But Menashe was a great idolater. And Rabbi Ashi, who was the editor of Talmud Bavli, hundreds and hundreds of years later, asked him, why? You're such an intelligent man, because he was talking to him about halach, about Monsey. And Menashe told him that if you would have lived in our time, and you would have been wearing a robe, and you would see idolatry, you would lift up your robe so you could run faster in order to go worship it. In other words, don't judge us. Rabbi Ashi lived in the 5th century after the Common Era, 5 centuries after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Menashe lived during the era of the first Beis HaMikdash. He says, don't judge us, don't judge us. There was a tremendous fire that burnt for many generations in idolatry. The Gemara says in Yom Daf Samach Tes that after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, during the era of the second Beis HaMikdash, the Anshe Knesset Agdela obliterated the inclination for idolatry. And I don't think it means it was completely obliterated, but it means it was weakened significantly, and it also took on a lot of other forms. Today, people engage in different types of idolatry, but the principle may be similar. And I think I would just add that maybe a lot of what the Rambam is teaching us is also halacha, that even though in our day and age, these types of idol practices the Rambam is going to describe are very, very uncommon. There are some cults that do it, but not many. Nonetheless, the philosophy behind them is still applicable. The idea that someone has power outside of Hashem, that Hashem wants we should confer glory on them because they have power outside of Hashem. Hashem gave them that power. These are very common misconceptions in our daily lives, especially when it comes to issues like livelihood and money and people in our lives. So the Rambam, perhaps by giving this whole history, is also giving us a halacha, because if we can divest the message from the incarnation, we could see that it's applicable to all generations. I have a question. If a principal appoints, if a dean of a school appoints a principal, the principal has a lot of powers, and he can act on his powers. You do give him credit for doing a good job. So what's the difference? So we have to say the error of Avodah Zarah was simply ascribing to agents the full power of God. That in this case, they have no power. Exactly. It's like the axe in the hand of the wood chopper. The axe is doing a significant thing, but it's just a tool in the hand of the wood chopper. So when I finish chopping the wood, you don't go and you don't give a paycheck to the axe. Not only because it won't know what to do with the paycheck, because the credit goes to the wood chopper, not to the axe. Not that we don't appreciate the axe. We appreciate the axe as a tool. A tool, yeah. We appreciate Bal Tashkes. We don't destroy an axe. We appreciate the sun. We cherish it. We thank Hashem every day for it. Hameir la'aretz v'ladarim ala berachimim. Baruch ata Hashem yoitzer ha'ma'oros. We thank Hashem every day for the sun. We don't take it for granted. Yoitzer oiru v'erichayshach. We thank God for the sun, and we thank God for the moon, and we thank God for all of the systems in the world and for all of the systems in our body, for our circulatory system and our urinary system and our digestive system, our respiratory system, all the 9 systems. We're very thankful. We're very thankful. We're thankful to Hashem for all these systems. They are tools that Hashem uses. So we appreciate them as divine tools. We don't appreciate them as divine tools. And on their own, they have no significance. They are manifestations of Hashem's energy and Hashem's wisdom. That's the idea. And the Ikar Avodah Zarah is when you stop making that differentiation. This chapter in Rambam is a must-learn for everybody. Everyone has to learn this chapter in Rambam. It seems like from the Rambam that the priests had a lot of power. The priests had a lot of power. The priests still have a lot of power. Even modern-day people have been duped by those who claim a divine encounter and having been given a message and a mission. You have the Mormons, you have so many other groups among different religions. The fraudster gave good arguments to people thirsty for spirituality, and they fall prey to their arguments. Very few people before Avram had a tradition of monotheism. Until Matan Torah, it was only Avram's descendants and the students of Shem and Aver. So it seemed like it wasn't their fault. You're right. Many people were not at fault. After Matan Torah, we have this tradition of Judaism. Matan Torah itself has a very strong logical and historical proof of veracity, a very strong Messiah, as we discussed in Hilchos Torah. But people are still looking for the easy way out. Believe in me, worship this, and you'll get paradise. So many flock to these spin-offs and Avodah Zarah. Even some Jews, even till today, there are different forms of Avodah Zarah that are very enticing because they seem enlightening and they seem very promising. That's true. Yeah, very well, very well. The Rambam says that Avram had no teacher. Didn't Hashem's truth and the tradition he gave to Adam and Noach exist among a small number of people? Yeah, the Rambam says, Chanoich, Mesushalach, Noach, Shem, and Aver. But Avram Avinu grew up in a home and a community entrenched in idolatry. Yes, Rivka went to Shem. It says, Vayelech Rivka lidrishas Hashem. Rivka went to Shem. And Yaakov Avinu learned in the yeshiva of Aver. That's true. Aver was Shem's great-grandson. That's all true. But Avram Avinu, when he was growing up, he was entrenched in idolatry. Later, he may have met some of these people. Why does the Rambam say wood and stone? Why doesn't he speak about metals, gold and silver? Some say maybe he's referring to the one who was crucified on wood, and stone refers to him, whose horse's hoof leaped with him to heaven after jumping over the stone situated on the site of the Beis HaMikdash. Do you think when the Rambam says wood and stone, he is referring to some of the false beliefs of Christianity? It's possible, but the Rambam here is referring to the time before Avram Avinu. Where does Christianity stand on the spectrum of Avodah Zarah? Well, you heard the Rambam's description of Avodah Zarah, so you answer the same question. You answer that question. You see, the Rambam said, what's Ikar Avodah Zarah? Attributing any divine any significance and prominence and glory to anything outside of Hashem. Is the moon amazing? Is the sun amazing? Yeah. Just as Venus is amazing, and Jupiter is amazing, and Mars is amazing, and Mercury is amazing, and all the galaxies are beyond amazing, and our planet is beyond amazing, and every aspect of it is beyond amazing. As what? As divine tools, as the manifestation of the divine. So that's why even the Trinity, the idea of partnering between God and somebody else, is part of Avodah Zarah. The big question is, are Gentiles forbidden to believe in Shittuf, to believe in partnership? There's God, but there's also other gods under God, right? Like Dikkan Avodah Zarah. That's ultimately a machlokes in Rishonim, and the Ramah in Erech Chaim Siman Kuf Nun Vav quotes the Shitta of Taisvis, that Bnei Noach are not mitzvah on Shittuf. But there's a machlokes among the Rishonim. The Rambam, it's mashma that this is also Avodah Zarah, Iker Avodah Zarah. In other words, even attributing the divinity to somebody under God is also a problem. The mixed multitudes who left Egypt with the Jews, were they the ones who brought the Jews back to Avodah Zarah? No. The Rambam says that already in Mitzrayim, the Jews emulated the Egyptians. The Erev Rav later perhaps brought them back through the Egel. That's what you mean. That's possible, but the Rambam doesn't discuss that. Is astrology prohibited by the Torah and everything that's connected to it? The Rambam was no fan of astrology. We'll learn about that later in Hilchos Avodah Zarah. It's not such a clear answer. I don't have such a brief and clear answer for it. It's nuanced. Last question. Could you give us an answer why the Rambam doesn't say that Avram told Yitzchak to teach others? So I saw one of the Mefarshim says, because it says in Medrash on the pasuk V'yitin lecha lakim etal hashamayim mishmani aretz v'dagam v'sirish, when Yitzchak Avinu gave the brachas to Yaakov, so the Medrash says V'yitin lecha lakim etal hashamayim, tal hashamayim is Torah, and shmani haaretz is Nevi'im, and roiv dagan is Talmud, and there's other Medrashim where he says tal hashamayim is Mikra, and shmani haaretz is Mishneh, and roiv dagan v'sirish is Braisa and Gemara. In other words, this was not just a blessing to Yaakov for physical plenty, physical affluence and plenty, dew, and the fat of the land, and grain, and wine, that too. But he gave Yaakov Avinu a bracha of this. He gave them the bracha of Torah to teach others, which is, of course, why Yaakov had to get the bracha, not Esav. So the Avodas HaMelech says, that's why for Yaakov, Rambam had a source that Yitzchak didn't only teach Yaakov, but he appointed him to teach others. Because why would he give him these gifts? Special bracha that Yaakov got. Right? We don't see Yitzchak got this bracha. It says that Yitzchak was blessed, but not this bracha. So from here the Rambam deduces that Yaakov got a special shlichus. A bracha is not just a blessing, it's a shlichus, it's a mission. This is your destiny, this is your vocation to teach Torah. With Yitzchak, though, it says Avram Avinu taught it, because it's clearly, the pasuk says in Vayera, Hashem says, I love Avram Avinu, because Lamana ki yedatum an sheitzav es banav es beis yacharav v'shamru derech Hashem lasas tzedek mishpat. Avram Avinu is going to maintain the path of Hashem and teach it to his children and his family. So obviously, we know that Avram gave it over to Yitzchak, but there was no clear message that he nominated Yitzchak to teach. It's a very interesting answer. This is given by the Avodas HaMelech, but it's a very, very good diuk. Maybe I could add something. I'm not sure this is true. It says in Zohar that Avram is Chesed and Yitzchak is Gvura and Yaakov is Tiferes. Avram Avinu traveled everywhere. The Rambam says he traveled non-stop. He mobilized the world. Yaakov also traveled a lot. Yitzchak didn't travel. He traveled, but very few places, and he had to stay in Eretz Yisrael. He wasn't allowed to leave. When Yitzchak wanted to leave Eretz Yisrael, Hashem said, no, you're an Oila Tmima, ein Chutz La'aretz kedai lach. You're not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. You have to stay in Chutz La'aretz. So with Avram Avinu, he traveled to the masses. Yaakov Avinu also traveled, maybe not like Avram Avinu, but he also traveled. He was a fugitive, he ran here, he ran there, he dealt with a lot of different situations. Yitzchak was more stationary, and the people came to him on one level. Also spiritually, Gvura is extremely introverted. Chesed is outgoing. Chesed is extroverted. Gvura represents introspection, somebody who's very much internal, and you work inward. Your avodah is focused inward. Actually, Gvura is represented with strength and discipline and boundaries and restrictions, because Gvura is very much internal work. I go deeper and deeper and deeper into myself. So the way that Yitzchak taught was maybe different than the way Avram Avinu taught and Yaakov Avinu taught. Yaakov is midas hatiferes, rachamim. Avram Avinu is midas hachesed. Yitzchak taught in a different oifen. Rambam says, "V'yashav Yitzchak melamed umachzir." Also, by Avram Avinu, he says he had all the people with him. Anshe beis Avram. By Yaakov, it says kol hanilvim elav. He brought back all those who connected to him. By Yitzchak, it just says, Yashav Yitzchak melamed umachzir. Yitzchak sat and he taught and he brought back. It doesn't say he brought back all these people who came to him and connected to him. Why? Maybe with Yitzchak it was different. It wasn't so easy because Yitzchak was Yireh, Pachad Yitzchak. Yitzchak represented awe, reverence, fear. Yitzchak everything was very, very deep and internal and introspective. He was so refined. He was like a carbon. He was an Akedah even when he came back, even when he didn't die. He was an Akedah. He was a carbon. He was a carbon oil. He remained a carbon. So perhaps the way Yitzchak inspired, the way Yitzchak taught, was a little different. I'm just throwing that out. Have a wonderful day.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.